This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Muqtada Sadr demanded that the Iraqi Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki leave Basra and urged him to send a political delegation to end the crisis peacefully. Meanwhile, al-Maliki gave a 72-hour deadline for the Mahdi army militias to give up their weapons. Al-Maliki's ultimatum comes after fierce clashes erupted in Basra between armed Mahdi fighters and the Iraqi forces. Nearly 40 people have been killed and more than 200 others have been wounded in the confrontations.
In
a firm statement, the Iraqi Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki issued a warning to armed Sadr fighters in the city of Basra. According to the ultimatum, armed Mahdi fighters have 72 hours to turn in their weapons or they will face severe penalties. Meanwhile, the Iraqi forces continue to carry out a wide-scale offensive against fighters loyal to Shia leader Muqtada Sadr in Basra, where dozens of people have been killed and wounded. Supporters loyal to the Sadr faction took to the streets in several cities and provinces in southern Iraq. In addition, dozens of armed Mahdi fighters took to the streets of Baghdad, where they ordered local merchants to close their shops, prevented students from going to schools, and workers from going to their jobs. The Green Zone, where most government buildings and the U.S. and British embassies are located, came under mortar attacks, injuring several Americans. According to the U.S. military, the mortar attacks on the Green Zone were all launched from Sadr city. In an attempt to contain the situation, the Iraqi security forces expanded curfews to include, along with Basra, the following areas and provinces: Samwat, Nasiriyah, Kut, Hila, and Diwaniyah. The anti-Sadr campaign, which is being carried out by the Iraqi forces, is the largest military operation ever launched by the Iraqi army, without the help or backing of the U.S. or British forces. This is important to Washington, which is seeking to bring 20,000 of its troops home. It's also important to the British forces, which last year transferred the security responsibility over to the Iraqi forces. Khalid al-Kashif, Al-Arabiya.
Khalid al-Kashif, Al-Arabiya.
As the showdown between the Sadr faction and the Iraqi forces continues to escalate in more than one area in Iraq, life continues to go on in the narrow alleys of Sadr city. More than 1,000 Sunni families are living in this predominantly Shiite city where the plague of sectarian conflict has not spread.
They have been living here for more than 50 years. No one has forced them to leave the city, despite the fact that many other families in various areas of Baghdad have been forced to flee due to the sectarian conflict. The family of Abu Firas is one of dozens of Sunni families who have been living here in Sadr city, a predominantly Shiite area. Despite the growing sectarian tension in Iraq, Abu Firas has never thought to leave his home in Sadr city. Abu Firas said that all of his family and friends are living here in Sadr city.
The majority of residents here know me, and they don't discriminate between Sunni and Shiite. We will continue living here because we are a family. We will not leave town, even if they threaten to kill us. Here we are all relatives.
We asked Abu Firas's neighbors about their relationship with him. They said he is one of them, and they love him as a brother, and they all have shared good and bad times together.
We have lived all of our lives here. We, Sunnis and Shiites, have lived and grown up in the same neighborhood and shared food and clothes. I have been Abu Firas's neighbor for more than 20 years. I have just recently moved into this new home. They are good people and have never done anyone any harm, thank God. This sectarian prejudice between Sunnis and Shiites never came up before. As God is my witness, these words, Sunni and Shiite, were never used here before. We began to hear about this sectarian prejudice only this year.
A few meters away from the home of Abu Firas, the family of Hajja Mohammed, a Sunni woman whose husband is Shiite, have a home.
We have been living here for more than 45 years, and we have never discriminated between Sunnis and Shiites. My husband is Jafari from Arabiya, and I'm Sunni. This is what I want to tell you. We are a mixed family.
Perhaps many people have never thought that there are still Sunni families living in Sadr city, especially considering that many families in Baghdad have been forced to flee in light of the sectarian conflict. Here in Sadr city, dozens of Sunni families continue to live among their Shiite neighbors, perhaps because the plague of extremism has not spread to this place. Murtada al-Rashid, Al-Arabiya.
According to Iraqi security sources, 8 members from one family, including children, have been killed in a United States airstrike in northern Tikrit. This comes after a United States military force came under fire by armed Al-Qaeda fighters in the area.
The latest violence has put extreme pressure on a ceasefire by the Mehdi army, a ceasefire that's been credited with reducing the violence, not just in Basra, but across the country. Earlier, the Mehdi army announced that the ceasefire still holds, but for how long? Owen Fay reports on Iraq's intra-Shia conflict.
For months, the White House has been heralding its military surge as the reason why violence across Baghdad has dropped considerably. What's politically inconvenient for Washington to acknowledge is that much of this apparent success stems not from military strategy, but from a ceasefire declared last summer by the Mehdi army. A ceasefire recently extended, yet one which may be on the verge of collapse. And that ceasefire wasn't declared to end violence against coalition forces, but instead between rival Shiite groups. And it was prompted by fierce fighting last August in the holy city of Karbala, between the Mehdi army and Iraq's security services, which are largely under the control of a rival Shiite group, the Badr Brigades. The clashes began several days ago in Kut before moving south to Basra. And the great fear is that if this military operation doesn't work, they could spread again, this time north to Baghdad. And if that happens, it puts into jeopardy any further plans for U.S. troop withdrawals, while the Badr Brigade and the Mehdi army fight it out. The Mehdi army is believed to have as many as 60,000 fighters and is loyal to Muqtada al-Sadr. It is by far the largest armed group of its kind in Iraq. The Badr Brigade is the military wing of the most influential Shiite political party in the country. It was founded during Saddam's reign in opposition to his regime, and many of its members have been trained in Iran. The political and economic ties between this group and Tehran remain very strong. After the U.S. invasion, the group controlled the security forces to such an extent that the Interior Ministry was, for a time, run by the Badr Brigade's former military commander. By contrast, the Mehdi army was formed in 2003 to fight the occupation, and later the interim government put in place by the Americans. They fought for a time alongside Sunni groups united in the desire to drive the coalition out. But Muqtada al-Sadr made the decision to join the political process, and thereby alienated not only his former Sunni allies, but deepened the divide with his Shiite rivals. When the Golden Shrine in Samarra was destroyed in February 2006, the full might of the Mehdi army went on display, enacting bloody revenge on Sunni groups it held responsible for the blast, and placing the country on the verge of a full-scale civil war. Until that time, Nouri al-Maliki was reluctant to crack down too hard, because without Muqtada's political support, he would never have become prime minister. But the Mehdi army and the Badr organization have also been fighting each other. The prize both seek is control of the oil-rich south, and the knowledge that whoever controls Basra controls that oil. And this latest military operation is designed to keep this rivalry from exploding once again. Owen Fay, Al Jazeera.
Israel has agreed to transfer some security responsibilities to Palestinians in the West Bank town of Jenin. The concession is expected to be made by Defense Minister Ehud Barak at a meeting with Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad. Israeli officials say he's also agreed to let thousands more West Bank residents work in Israel. But they say he won't agree to remove the military checkpoints that have long crippled movement throughout the West Bank. And as Noor Uday reports, Palestinian residents living in Nablus have come to expect no real changes from these talks.
Calls for national reconciliation resonate in Nablus. This is one of 3 rallies held this Wednesday in the West Bank and Gaza, calling on Palestinian brethren to stop fighting and unite. No one in Nablus seems fazed by the news of the meeting in Jerusalem between Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad and Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak. Even reports of a possible agreement on Palestinian forces being deployed into additional Palestinian towns do not draw smiles here. People's daily experiences give them little faith in Israeli promises. 5 months ago, Palestinian forces were deployed to Nablus. But if you ask the residents, they don't feel any safer now than they did before, when Israel was in full physical control of the city, because nearly every night, there's a new Israeli raid. The feeling of insecurity is strongest here in the Balata refugee camp, the scene of repeated Israeli raids and assassinations. For these residents, safety is almost a foreign concept.
Only God can protect us. Barak can say whatever he wants, but on the ground we know better. I know that any time Israeli soldiers can be in the streets.
The Palestinian Authority has long accused Israel of undermining its credibility by launching almost daily raids in cities like Nablus and refusing to ease the crippling travel restrictions in the West Bank. The feeling in Balata is no different.
What authority? Do you think they give orders? We're all here oppressed. When Barak wants, he sends in his troops, and all we can do is hide. And our leaders and police do the same.
Short of a dramatic breakthrough to make life easier for ordinary Palestinians, Israeli promises and security meetings will do little to convince them that better and safer days are ahead. Noor Uday, Al Jazeera, Nablus.
Meanwhile, the Fatah faction of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has ruled out direct talks with Hamas unless they give up control of the Gaza Strip, which they seized last June. The rival factions agree in Yemen this week to revive negotiations after months of hostilities. Hamas has said reconciliation talks will begin on the 5th of April, but President Abbas's office insists the group, which won elections 2 years ago, must first relinquish control of Gaza.
Top story, IDF soldiers arrested the commander of the Hamas military wing responsible for masterminding the deadly attack at Netanyahu's Park Hotel on Passover night 6 years ago. 57-year-old Omar Abu Jaber was arrested near the West Bank city of Tulkarm. Military sources report that Abu Jaber tried to escape from the back entrance of a home where he was hiding when soldiers arrived to arrest him. 30 people were killed in the Park Hotel bombing and dozens more wounded. The arrest symbolizes the closing of the book on the 2002 attack, especially now, ahead of the upcoming Passover holiday.
Despite the relative drop in rocket fire, Palestinian terrorists fired 8 Qassams into Israel today. 2 of the rockets landed in Kibbutz Mefalsim in the Shar HaNegev Regional Council, causing significant damage to several buildings. The rest landed in open areas in the western Negev. No injuries were reported. Palestinian gunmen today also fired at a group of Israeli farmers working in the fields of Kibbutz Ein HaShlosha. One farmer was lightly injured in the eye from shrapnel. The Islamic Jihad's El Quds brigades claimed responsibility for all of today's attacks.
Israeli military actions against the Hamas help rather than harm the political negotiations. This according to Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, who said that Israel expects the negotiations to go on even as Israel continues operations in Gaza. Speaking at a conference on the legitimate rights of Israel with respect to international law, Livni said that Hamas's control of Gaza is a problem for all Arab countries in the region because it signals that extremists can take over moderate countries by way of democratic means. The foreign minister also said it is incumbent upon the international community to make a distinction between terror organizations who willingly attack civilians and a state like Israel that acts against terror organizations and sometimes accidentally harms civilians.
The Fatah organization, led by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, today ruled out talks with Hamas unless the terrorist group first relinquishes control of Gaza. The announcement cast further doubt on a Yemen-sponsored push for reconciliation between the two groups. Earlier this week, it appeared that talks in Yemen had yielded an agreement for a revival of direct talks between the groups and what was called a return to the situation that existed before the Gaza hostilities. Hamas had announced that direct talks would begin on April 5th, but it now appears that Fatah remains firm in its insistence that Hamas first give up control of Gaza to the Palestinian Authority. Israel will celebrate its 60th anniversary this year, but the country still finds its very legitimacy in question. Israel's historical and legal rights were the subject of a conference today, sponsored by the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Former Canadian Justice Minister Erwin Kotler and former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Dori Gold, told Israel Television's Oshri Elias that Israel not only faces military threats from countries like Iran, but also must defend itself from attacks on its right to exist.
The Islamization of Israel is laundered under the struggle against racism, where the demonization of Israel is laundered under the banner of human rights. That's more serious and more sophisticated because it invites the international community to bring about the dismantling of Israel, because an apartheid state should not exist. So what we have here is a more sophisticated approach to achieve what Ahmadinejad, in his crude language, is seeking, but the dismantling of Israel under the banner of the struggle against racism.
There is a very dangerous trend in the world community we're seeing of suddenly challenging, after 60 years, Israel's very legitimacy. It's sometimes evident in international circles like the United Nations. It's sometimes evident in academia, where you can have a debate in the Oxford Union over the question of whether there should be a one state to replace the state of Israel and a Palestinian state.
Controversy today surrounding the state comptroller's decision to investigate government actions to free Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard. Several politicians and senior defense officials today blasted State Comptroller Michael Lindenstrauss's inquiry, claiming it endangers sensitive efforts aimed at bringing about Pollard's release. 3 months ago, the Knesset State Control Committee asked Lindenstrauss to investigate previous government's actions to see if enough had been done to win Pollard's release. He's been imprisoned in the United States since 1987. Responding today to the allegations that his investigation is harming Pollard, Lindenstrauss said, "Whoever is making these baseless claims is hallucinating."
Palestinian journalists and all those who expose the Zionist crimes are subjected to killings. Martyr Hassan Shakura, the journalist who worked at the local Jerusalem radio, was the latest casualty of the occupation.
لطالما تعرض الصحفيون الفلسطينيون لانتهاكات واعتداءات عديدة على يد قوات الاحتلال الصهيوني.
Palestinian journalists have been subjected to many attacks by the criminal Zionist occupation, which works effortlessly to target whoever exposes the brutal Zionist crimes against the Palestinians. The image of Imad Ghanem, the cameraman for Al-Aqsa, is still present in people's minds. Attacks on journalists have included beatings, arrests, and direct shooting at journalists and their vehicles, despite wearing jackets labeled press. The occupation could care less about international laws and treaties that demand the protection of journalists and make it a crime to attack them.
وتجريم الاعتداء عليهم.
They're shooting at the camera. Take pictures. Take pictures.
Hassan Shakura, the journalist at the local Jerusalem radio, was the latest casualty of the Zionist attacks. He was martyred when he was hit by the occupation's missiles in the middle of March of 2008 in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza.
He was not the first casualty of the occupation. The occupation has always attacked journalists and press agencies. The profession is paved with the blood of Palestinian journalists.
Shakura, who was well known for his good manners and close ties with his colleagues, left a big void for those who worked with him.
The loss of Hassan Shakura is not only a loss on a professional level, but also on a personal level. For example, when I came in this morning, we had a problem with the internet connection, so I told my colleagues, I wish we had Hassan with us this morning.
The name of the journalist Hassan Shakura will be added to the list of martyrs who died while performing their honorable duty. He will not be the last casualty of the Zionist attacks, especially if the international community remains silent.
Dozens of foreign journalists and human rights activists participated in a tour of Gaza to witness the signs of the Zionist Holocaust in Gaza. The journalists were invited by the office of the Palestinian Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh to reveal the signs of the latest crimes that were committed in Gaza. Our colleague, Mohammed Mansour, provided us with the following report.
18 foreign journalists and human rights activists came to Gaza after they were invited by the office of the Palestinian Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh to see with their own eyes what has happened to the Palestinian citizens of Gaza after the Holocaust that was committed against their children and relatives.
There were approximately 20 journalists from the US, Germany, Holland, Belgium, Britain, France, China, Japan, and other countries from all over the world.
The tour started with a visit to Izbat Abd Rabbo in northern Gaza. The mother of the child, Omar Dardona, told the story of her child who was murdered by a Zionist missile while he was playing with a soccer ball. Also, 80-year-old Sheikh Dardona summed up the story in a few English words.
This is Arab land. It is now Jewish land.
The foreign journalists then went to the headquarters of the Workers' Union, which was shelled by the occupation's planes. Then they went to the headquarters of the Interior Ministry, which was also shelled. 5-month-old Muhammad Nasser Burri was murdered during the attack. Then they were led by Dr. Jamal al-Khudri to the symbolic gravesite representing 3,900 Palestinian factories that were destroyed. The tour concluded with a visit to the Shifa hospital. Dr. Hassan Khalaf, the general manager of the hospital, showed them the different sections, including the intensive care unit that was full of victims from the Holocaust who are in critical condition. The hospital's visit was concluded with a press conference held by Dr. Bassam Naim, the Minister of Health.
For example, we may have medicine to treat cancer, but we do not have the needles necessary to administer the medicine due to the siege.
The foreign journalists and activists who went on the tour expressed their sadness because of the conditions in our beloved Gaza Strip.
I hope that all politicians in Germany, Europe, and America will visit Gaza.
The borders and factories are closed. This means that people are being starved and unemployment is high. It is obvious that something must be done.
After this tour ends, the foreign journalists will leave Gaza through the Beit Hanun Erez checkpoint. There were no problems for the foreign journalists to go in and out of Gaza, but the big problem is, will these journalists give a voice to Gaza's children so Western governments can hear them? Perhaps no one knows.
ارتفع سعر مزيج برنت أكثر من $1 في المعاملات الآجلة.
The price of Brent crude oil increased by more than $1 in the trades market with the renewed weakening of the U.S. currency. In the Nemex Mercantile Exchange, the price of U.S. light crude oil increased by 65 cents, reaching $101.52 per barrel. In the international London market, Brent crude oil increased by $1, reaching $100.89 per barrel. More information about conditions of the oil market in the following report.
سجلت أسعار النفط الخام في الأسواق العالمية يوم أمس.
Yesterday, crude oil prices in international markets fell back to $100 per barrel as a result of the slight improvement in the value of the United States dollar. The announcement made by Saudi Arabia, the largest oil exporter in the world, that it will work towards expanding oil production was the main factor for this decline, which came one day after United States Vice President Dick Cheney met with the Saudi Crown Prince and oil minister. OPEC rejected the calls by the United States and primary oil importing nations to increase oil production in order to reduce the prices of oil in the international markets. OPEC decided to continue producing oil at current levels at a time when the price of oil has recently climbed to record highs, reaching the highest price ever on March 17 when it exceeded $111 per barrel.
الحاجات أو الاحتياجات الأساسية للطبقة المتوسطة في أمريكا.
No doubt that there are negative effects caused by the increase in fuel prices. This will affect the price of basic necessities for the middle class in America, from the rise in food prices to transportation to all other consumer commodities. Why are fuel prices going up at this time of the year in the spring, which is mainly a working period? Usually prices go up during the winter.
فترة عمل عادة ترتفع الأسعار في فترة الشتاء.
The increase in the price of oil, which impacts commodities and oil byproducts, has a major effect on the United States economy, which is witnessing a recession similar to what happened in the 1970s, but for different reasons. Meanwhile, observers expect some decline in oil prices from current levels or a reduction in the oil prices to between $80 and $110 per barrel for the remainder of 2008. The signs have become clear that the era of low oil prices has passed and will never return after the price of oil exceeded $100 per barrel for the first time last week. Meanwhile, observers ruled out that there will be a major decrease in oil prices anytime soon. Imad Mahdi, Saudi Arabia Television, Washington.
Kuwait recently held a beauty pageant contest for camels.
يرتبط مصطلح مسابقة ملكات الجمال في
While in most parts of the world the phrase beauty pageant is usually associated with beautiful women, in Kuwait it is all about camels. In Al Abdali, 150 kilometers outside the Kuwaiti capital of Kuwait, camel owners from across the Gulf gathered to show off their camels in a contest dubbed Mazyan al-Ibil, which means in the Bedouin language, the most beautiful camel. In the contest, the camels were divided into different categories according to their breed. Hundreds of camels took part in the parade, with their owners hoping they would be awarded the title of the most beautiful camel. Just like their human counterparts, camel contestants must meet certain characteristics before entering the contest.
شارك فيها مئات النوق سعيا للفوز باللقب الغالي. ومثلما لملكات جمال البشر مواصفات خاصة، فإن الجمال لدى الإبل له معاييره أيضا.
The characteristics that help the camel win are the length of the neck, the form, the face, the cheeks, and the hamstring. That is what distinguishes one camel from another.
ويحصل أصحاب الإبل الفائزة في المسابقة.
The owners of the winning camels receive valuable prizes, including top-of-the-line cars. In addition, the elegant females or strapping males who attract the right attention during the show could sell for very high prices.
أسعار مرتفعة للغاية.
Because these camels finished in first place, they are unique and very valuable. All the camels that finished in first place share the same characteristics and physical features.
مسابقة جميلات الإبل.
This was a camel beauty contest held in Kuwait, a modern and fast-developing nation. This means that camels continue to enjoy a prestige position in Kuwait, as they are symbolic in the lives of the Bedouins there.
رمزا للحياة البدوية الأصيلة.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.